Good evening, good morning, good night, or good day to you all. I'm presently in the capital of the northern Norway, the gateway to the Arctic Sea, Tromsø, and I'm calling up my good friend Charles Ortel. Are you there?
I am indeed, and I am not in Tromsø.
Unfortunately, but I will get you here. Don't you worry. Where are you?
I'm in Bristol, England.
Ah, on the coast. Very nice. Banksy had some. Banksy was from Bristol, I think. Actually, I visited Bristol last year. But let's cut the small talk, Charles. It's been a very eventful week, and actually, I'm a bit at a loss where to start. But let's start with the most recent thing, and then I'm not talking about Prigozhin's demise in Russia yesterday. I'm actually going back to, or moving up even further to Tucker Carlson, who was fired from Fox News and has interviews almost every day. And last night he interviewed Donald J. Trump. I didn't have a chance to watch it, but I'm sure you did. So what happened? What did he say?
It's really worth your viewers tuning in. You can access it many different ways. I got it through Zero Hedge. It is an epic performance. As of in less than 24 hours, way less than 24 hours, it had over 150 million views, which is remarkable. It's a 45-minute, 46-minute interaction. Tucker and Trump are very comfortable together. I think in time it will mark a point, not merely where Ron DeSantis's campaign ended, but where the battle between podcasting and new media formats versus traditional advertising-based formats has now been settled. I think the viewership for the Fox News hosted debate was very light. I think the content was very weak. I think the approach is seriously damaged. And I think Trump he showed his wisdom in saying, why should I waste my time with this? I mean, maybe Vivek Ramaswamy is somebody who's interesting and whose ideas would add to the Trump brand and to the Trump platform. But most of the other guys on stage were just uttering platitudes. I think Mike Pence looked pathetic. And in contrast, Trump he attacked some of the big issues of the day. We went right up into the question of Joe Biden's mental capacity and physical health. He addressed the issue of Kamala Harris and her evident lack of qualifications for holding the second highest office in America, the American political scene. He refused to back down on his contention that it's legitimate to ask questions about what really happened in 2020. I'll save for the viewers the surprise of hearing Trump talk about Chris Wallace and hearing Tucker talk both about Fox and about Chris Wallace. Let's just say I hope that Tucker's lawyers have drafted a very good set of clauses there in his contract.
We're recording this on Thursday. Let's be frank about that. And we're going to air it on Saturday. Today, we have a daily radio show at 9 a.m. on weekdays. And I actually checked Tucker's tweet at 9 a.m. Norwegian time. Then it was not 171. It was 225 millions. So by Saturday, it ought to be 500 million people, or, 500 million views. 500 million views, which is incredible. And it really serves, it's relevant to what we are doing, Charles. We have we have a meager audience, but we're growing, and we ought to be growing. And it is with no comparison, of course, mainstream media has, thanks to their sticking to the ruling narrative or the narrative of the rulers, so to speak, have lost credibility. And people know, all over the world, know if they want to go and find out what's really going on, they have to go to independence. And Tucker is, of course, the most famous of them all and has the most success. And now, speaking about going back to the interview, some people told me that Trump also seemed to he seemed to talk a lot. He seemed relaxed, is what I heard. But he still spoke favorably about the vaccine, COVID vaccine. I don't think personally that's going to have any big impact. But what do you think? Did you make a note of that?
I didn't. I watched what I thought was the whole thing, and I didn't. Maybe I was busy or distracted at that point, but I didn't catch that. I agree that he's got some issues there. Initially, his instincts were to question the lockdown and to question the approach that the science experts, the Garden Gnome, Fauci, and others, the Scarf Lady, Birx, were selling us. And I think he might be president today if he listened to his instincts. I think it is certainly legitimate now, and we're seeing in actually in mainstream scientific journals and even in the mainstream media, finally governments are going back and saying, wait a minute, what did we really do here? And who is better off and who is worse off? And were there any conflicts of interest? So I think that's a legitimate area of inquiry. And indeed, I think it's better, even if you have a lot of noise, it's better to have many, many voices looking at complex issues from different positions than it is to have Mike Pence, let's say, be the direct minister of propaganda telling you what the government knows to be the case. I mean, I'd rather be, I prefer the noise, even if it's very noisy, to the approach that Pence and now Biden seem to want to take.
I agree. Now, earlier in the week, Tucker interviewed former U.S. Army Colonel Douglas Macgregor. And I watched most of it, but actually I found out, even haven't had the time to watch it all, I found it was about time to present my own view on the Ukraine war, because it's evident and has been evident for me for a long time, but I had to keep sort of a distance, because in Norway, if you are not rooting for NATO and the Ukrainians, you're immediately labeled a Putinist. So yesterday I wrote a piece, I translated it into English as well, where I said, hey, okay, go and root for Ukraine, that's all fine. They were attacked, but was that without reason? And leave the reasons aside. I mean, is this war going to go bring them anything? And McGregor said that Biden initiated the combat pay for U.S. forces a week or two back, which tells us that there are probably a number of U.S. troops on the ground in Ukraine. And it seems to me that the whole world is sacrificing the Ukrainians to reach their own goal of destroying Russia. And that can end badly, don't you think?
I do. I mean, going back to base principles here, I think that people like McGregor and other professional soldiers understand, if they're honest, that the last thing that you want to do is actually fight. I mean, fighting is not a pleasant thing to do. You're trying to kill somebody, they're trying to kill you. That's not a good place to be. You'd like to resolve that before you get to that place. But it seems this administration in particular is all in for perpetual war. And I question whether the goal is defeating Russia or the goal is selling more military equipment. Because I don't think that we're going to defeat Russia. And I do think that this idea really, we can't just blame Democrats, Republicans and Democrats alike in the United States, and I think the right and the left across the world seem to be very interested in having conflicts. They happen all over the place, not just because we're involved, Norway and the U.S. But it's to me, it's just, this is letting Biden have control of whether we go to war or don't go to war or send troops, deploy troops or not, is like letting a petulant child drink at age 12 and then go out and wreck the family car over and over and over again. We should be looking across. I know NATO is now a big organization, but if we were smart, and I think I've said this before, we would try to move NATO out of existence. We would try to manipulate things so that the European continent, which has been so far a venue for two very bad world wars, a major theater for two world wars, we should try to create the conditions while we're alive so that future generations can have peace and so that we don't need a NATO. And instead, we're trying to make NATO bigger and bigger and expand its mission. And what does that involve? Selling more military equipment.
True. No doubt the armament industry, the military industrial complex, as Eisenhower spoke of some 60 years ago, is still alive and are, of course, reaping in profits. Yesterday, we brought a story about, that is Wednesday, we brought a story about U.S. Army officials, officers, even international military people said that the spring offensive of the Ukrainians had failed because they had not placed their troops correctly. They were misplacing their troops. Then add to that the chairman of the EU military committee last night said, I don't think it's realistic that Ukraine will ever regain the territories that they lost. Now, it seems to me that they are realizing that there is no final solution to this war. Of course, Russia won't withdraw, no matter how much the Ukrainians fight on behalf of NATO and the warlords. And no matter how much they want to do to, coming back. But there are a large number of Russians in the Ukrainian, in Crimea, in Donetsk, in Lugansk, that were, and they had a war of attrition since 2014. It seems to me like we're going to end up with another stalemate conflict, hopefully without UN troops, like Kashmir, like Lebanon.
Well, that may even be a hopeful view, because what really is dangerous, and I'm no expert on world history and modern world history, but my understanding is that the situation in the west of Ukraine is increasingly also looking very unstable, as the Poles are perhaps thinking about using the wider instability in Ukraine as an excuse to maybe insert some troops into the west of Ukraine. Meanwhile, Belarus is acting very bellicosely, shall we say. And so this really is a very dangerous situation. And we have, in the United States, playing point on it, we have somebody who should actually, in my opinion, be in prison, Victoria Nuland. She's the Deputy Secretary of State, which in our system, she's not confirmed. She's acting. She hasn't been confirmed by the Senate. And I doubt she could be. She has screwed up virtually everything she's ever done in public service. And, one wonders why we would want to do what we did last year, when it seemed after a few weeks of fighting, there was a compromise that was seemed to be acceptable to the Ukrainians to make Ukraine neutral and to do some deal on territory or whatever. And we know that Boris Johnson, for some reason, put the kibosh, nixed that. and how many Ukrainian lives and other lives have been lost since. Another point I just quickly make is that in the U.S., when the U.S. was formed in 1776 via violent revolution, the founders understood the dangers of going to war. And so they wanted to force the body that's closest to the people, the House of Representatives, to declare war. We have, in effect, declared war on Russia using Ukrainian troops and Ukrainian volunteers. I mean, this is so far away from what we should want to be doing as the U.S. I can't speak for Norway. And I hope we course correct.
It's even further away from us. I mean, I'm sitting here maybe, let's say, 600 kilometers, something like that, away from the Russian border. I mean, people up here in the north of Norway have had Russia and are used to live with Russia as a neighbor. They lived with the Soviet Union as a neighbor. In the Cold War, there were large military installations in this county and in the northernmost county of Finnmark. After the Soviet Union broke down, all these military camps were most of them were dismantled and relocated a bit further south. And northern Norwegians got used to doing trade as they've done historically. It was called the Pomor trade in the old days. And they are not at all convinced in general. Of course, I'm not purporting to speak for them all, but they are not at all convinced that the NATO policies, and NATO used to be, it's called the Atlantic Treaty, Atlantic Pact. And it was our guarantee that Norway would not fall under the Soviet spell. Now, Soviet has gone. But I don't think that the fear of being invaded by Russia has risen after the Soviet Union failed.
Well, and now go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So now the difficult part is we all assume that, or Western commentators other than you and I tend to assume that Putin is weak and he's not popular and he's losing and that Russia doesn't have the will to continue. What if the opposite is true? What if Russia is looking at what's happened? We've run down our ammunition and our weapons supplies. We've lost equipment. We've spent a lot of money as America we don't have. We've run up our debt. We've run up our deficit. We've got a president who is weak mentally and physically. We have internal division in the U.S. What if Russia decides to press now? And I'm not saying they're going to go take land away from Norway, but what if they start exacting prices from nations that have been basically breaking the Minsk Accords? What if they start doing that?
What if, back to Victoria Nuland, we have to do a further program on her, or further research into what she's been doing. But she recently visited Niger, didn't she? And we spoke about Niger last week. And I've seen pictures, I've seen videos from Niamey, the capital of Niger, people dancing in the street, chanting, "We don't want France." They don't want the US, they don't want France, they don't want China either. But when you saw, and I saw another clip from the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sergei Lavrov, attending a meeting in Africa. He was welcomed, he got the hero's welcome. And Thursday, it became known that Saudi Arabia is now welcomed into the BRICS countries.
Iran.
Was Iran invited too? Wow, that is significant. I mean,
right.
What do you see?
Well, one of the things, I did a podcast yesterday with Jason Goodman, and before the Trump interview, and I was saying that I felt that, and I'm entitled to my opinion, that in Biden, we have somebody who has been bought and paid for by at least one country, China, and who knows how many others. And if you stop being, turn the other cheek nice, and instead say, let's stitch together a narrative of what we know. What if the Biden family was paid all this extra money to demolish America, to demolish the West? Would that explain our hasty departure from what I call Afghanistan now, Afghanistan? Would that explain our bloody efforts here in Ukraine? Would that explain a lot of other moves around the world that have certainly weakened America's image and financial position? And who benefits from all that? In theory, China does. Now, China has its own internal problems with too much debt and other issues. But it certainly does look to me under Biden's watch that, instead of making America great again, he's MAPA, make America pathetic again. Let's go back and be worse than Carter.
The precursor for EU was the Rome Club. I'm not sure whether the Rome Club still exists, but I certainly know that we have something called the World Economic Forum, which their headquarters are in Davos. It's led by its founder, Klaus Schwab. And he seems to be gathering all the elites from all over the world. Larry Fink is on the board of trustees, I believe. The director general is the Norwegian former Minister of Foreign Affairs, Børge Brende. He took over after our current Minister of Energy. This is, because you just said, what if Biden and company, we should say, are doing this to destroy America? Maybe they're not destroying America. They're destroying the America you remember, the America that I love too. I went to school there. But they are dividing the world between the elites and the have-nots and those who have. That's what I'm afraid of.
Well, what's really obscene is what they also are doing. It seems like they want to punish everybody but the insiders. I mean, their program is not. It's reminiscent. In the States, some refer to Joe Biden's speeches with the dark red background and the black, whatever is dark Brandon. But we're told that the eminent Dr. Schwab, I don't think he's a medical doctor. I believe it's in economics. Believes we're going to eat bugs, be locked down in small cities, be told what we want to do and maybe how long we could live. And I mean, this is not a vision that most human beings find as a welcome vision. And yet it's being sold aggressively or thrust down our throats in propaganda in schools and by thought leaders around the world. The World Economic Forum, to me, is far worse than the League of Nations. It might arguably be worse than the Axis. I mean, it is something that shouldn't be a charity. It shouldn't be controlled by one man and his family. It shouldn't be tax deductible to go to that thing. It shouldn't be a business expense to go to that thing. And there should be very serious questions asked and answered about these type of multinational, multilateral organizations which come out of nowhere and try to take over the world, but won't, of course, be regulated themselves. This, to me, is the only valuable thing I see in the World Economic Forum is almost everything they advocate, you can be sure is wrong. Just do the opposite of what they say and you'll be fine.
Have you ever noticed that mainstream media isn't doing their job? Media's job used to be to protect the people from shady government and corporation behaviors and keeping them in check. But the mainstream media are now protecting them against you. Document.news is a 100% free and independent media house funded by the people, working for the people. We'd like to continue our job informing you about what's really going on, so you're not left with media who tells you what to think instead of giving you information to think about. Support us and thus support yourselves and your loved ones. Thank you.
Charles, my battery is about to run out, but I have to ask you one question because we've gotten that question here too. What is happening with the congressional hearings? What is happening? Is Biden, and we spoke about it briefly last week, is Biden going to face some sort of inquiry for what he did? I mean, for the Hunter and for corruption and for his email aliases, etc.?
Absolutely. I think John Solomon of Just the News just published something on Thursday, today, in America, that goes back over the timeline and conclusively shows that Biden was lying about the prosecutor. Remember, he alleged that our policy, career state people, wanted Victor Shokin gone, and that he was just carrying out State Department policy. That is not true. Shokin was making progress investigating corruption, specifically corruption involving Burisma and Biden. And Biden and his people around him could not afford to let Shokin continue that. And in Solomon's piece in Just the News, we learned for the first time, although the public learns for the first time, that Eric Ciarmella was centrally involved in this. This is the person whose name you can't utter in some places, who was heavily involved in the impeachment, alleging that Trump had made a bad phone call with Zelensky. So I think this story is really moving now in the mainstream.
I think I read somewhere, it must have been in one of your mails, that Hunter Biden was even pushing or had tried to get his fingers into the impeachment against Trump too.
Exactly. So that stuff, generally in this very controversial topics in the United States, the truth we see takes months or even years to seep out. It's out. The money people know, the prosecutors know, and really what's going on now is the very rich donors are trying to figure out, A, will Biden even make it, to the general election with his health and his mental capacity intact? And if he does, will he make it to the inauguration?
I personally doubt that, thanks to your input, not the least, Charles Hertel. Once again, it's an honor to host you. It's a delight to speak to you. I always learn something. People out there, don't forget that Charles also has his own show twice a week with Jason Goodman, Crowdsource the Truth. We'll provide the links in the article. Be sure to watch his shows. Be sure to watch our shows and read Document.news. We don't have the manpower to update it as frequently as we would like, but we would sure like your support. Document at PayPal at Document.no. You will have a QR code and other means to support us in the article. Thanks a lot for watching. Be sure to tune back next week. Charles, my phone is dying. If not, we could sit and talk all evening.
All right. Stay cool. Stay warm, rather.
Thank you. See you soon. Bye, everyone.